Ferrari at breakfast on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
10 to 9 is the time where we'll come back to that aspect of the Queen's speech that we're discussing, trying to stop any electoral fraud with voter ID, but to another measure, and the proposals aim to improve the lives of animals that were introduced yesterday. Measures ranging from the bans on pet monkeys to outlawing foie gras, and the suggestion, of course, there should be tougher measures concerning the import of hunting trophies, prohibition of live animal exports for slaughter and for fattening. And this probably interests you, a lot of you, recalling the number of phone-ins we've done and how widespread this was. Hopefully it has diminished a little as we emerge from the pandemic. Widespread so-called pet theft, which was mostly dogs, not solely, you had some cats and some horses as well, but pet theft and puppy smuggling. Details now from Environment, Food and Rural Affairs Secretary George Eustice, who joins me. Why is this such a priority for the government? Good morning, Secretary of State.
Good morning. Well, look, there are a lot of issues on animal welfare where I think we can do better. This is a very broad range of things, ranging from introducing microchipping on cats right through to the ban on live animal exports, through to some of those other international things as well, such as the banning of the import of hunting trophies. These are, each of them, quite small issues, but all issues where we could do better than we have done in the past, and where we should make some of these legal changes.
Given the challenges that face the country as it emerges from the pandemic, and the focus there's been on social care, isn't this rather meddling around the edges and dodging the big issues, such as the funding of adequate social care?
Well, no, when it comes to adult social care, the Prime Minister said we're going to bring forward our proposals on this.
But what does that mean, in all honesty? We've been told something was oven ready nearly 2 years ago, Secretary of State.
Yes, when the Prime Minister made that comment, obviously he didn't know what lay ahead of him. And first of all, we had the chaos at the end of the last Parliament over Brexit and all the rancour concerning that forced a general election. And obviously straight after that general election, we've been plunged into this coronavirus pandemic. It is the Department for Health and Social Care that has had to lead on the pandemic, and that also leads on this issue of adult social care, and that has affected their bandwidth to be able to bring these proposals forward.
So when might we expect them again?
Well, the Prime Minister said later this year we will bring forward those proposals. There's been consensus for some years that the answer probably lies in some kind of cap on the maximum contribution that you'd expect people to make to their care in old age, so that they don't necessarily have to sell their home or don't see all of their assets and equity eroded at the end of their life. But getting the detail of that right has proved problematic, as you'll recall from the 2017 election, when it became quite an issue. And I think ideally on this, given that it is a long-term challenge, we should publish those proposals and try to get a cross-party consensus about the way forward.
Yes. Just lastly, on this, why should we believe a word he says on this? He said it was oven ready nearly 2 years ago, Secretary of State.
Well, as I said, he's had a lot on his plate since he was on the steps of Downing Street. No Prime Minister knows what events lie ahead of them, and this Prime Minister in particular has had to deal with quite a lot of events.
One other aspect that's causing a degree of consternation is this possible attempt to crack down on electoral fraud through voter ID. Given that the number of instances of fraud are vanishingly thin, why is this necessary?
Well, we put this in our manifesto. It's a commitment that we made, and I think it's important to recognise that we want there to be integrity in the voting system, and Northern Ireland has had this approach since 2003 of just requiring photo ID. It's worked fairly well. People have got used to it, and it does mean that you can't get people impersonating somebody else when they go to the polling station. And alongside this, we're also doing other measures, so looking at limiting the number of postal votes that a political party can handle, because there's been issues around sort of vote harvesting in the past, and also limiting the number of proxy votes that an individual can do, because some of these areas have been open to some abuse. There was a commission that looked at this to make recommendations, and we're just implementing those now.
Sir Keir Starmer, Ed Miliband, Shami Chakrabarti are all saying this actually is effectively electioneering. It will be Labour voters, possibly millions, a couple of million, who will be frozen out. Is this just some rather clever trick or ploy by the Tories, Mr Eustice?
No. Look, and it's been put to me, earlier this morning that it may be older people who are less likely to have photo ID. Well, people will often point to the fact that older people are also more likely to vote Conservative. So there's no political thing in this. It is about the integrity of our electoral system, preventing voter fraud. And there have been instances, for instance, in Tower Hamlets in 2015. And I just think it's important that people have confidence in that system.
A lot going on domestically for the government to discuss. Are you aware of any moves that are being made concerning the troubling escalation of conflict in the Middle East, Mr. Eustice?
Well, I understand that Dominic Raab may be saying more on this later. I think there may be a statement in Parliament. It's obviously an incredibly febrile situation. We're very concerned by the escalation that we're seeing there. These rocket attacks coming from Gaza on Israel are obviously, completely unacceptable. But we do need everybody to calm down and try to de-escalate this situation.
Remembering your view on the European Union some years ago, are you aware Michel Barnier has now called for France to suspend all immigration from outside the EU for 5 years because the borders are not strong enough? Mr. Eustice, this is a rather turnaround of events, isn't it?
Yes, well, of course, the UK always recognised that complete free movement and borderless travel had its challenges, and that's why we never signed up to something called the Schengen Agreement that enabled that borderless travel. And I think just people's lack of confidence in the ability to control who's coming into the country, to know who's coming in and under what terms and under what visa, is one of the reasons many people thought that we should leave the European Union.
It's a tad rich coming from Mr. Barnier, isn't it? Monsieur Barnier, isn't it, Mr. Eustice?
Well, I suppose it is. But it is an admission, and I think we will see more of this. That a lot about the way the European Union has developed isn't really working very well, and it is for them to try to address that. But we did the right thing, I think, and took a decision that this was a chapter of our history that was over and that we were going to become an independent country again. Finally,
I mentioned Ed Miliband. He was with me earlier today on the show on the subject of electric cars, and he's pushing the drive for that. He's trialling a Renault, but he thinks he's going to get an electric Nissan. Do you have an electric car?
My personal car is a very old car, and so way before electric cars were around. But the car that I do have use of as a ministerial car is actually an electric Range Rover. So it is.
Good
technology
God.
has come on extraordinarily that even I hadn't believed that
you can plug a Range Rover into the wall. That's startling.
Yes. It is they have I think they brought them out in the last year, and in fact the government car service that run these things, they're increasingly. I think it's great that they can support Jaguar Land Rover, great British company.
Do you think you will go electric though, as and when you have the opportunity, as and when you decide to trade in your car?
Yes, when my old 20-year-old car finally conks out, I will probably get an electric one next.
What is your 20-year-old car?
It is an old Range Rover. I'm a big Jaguar Land Rover fan, always have been.
Well, perfect for the roads of Camberth and Redruth, I'm sure. Absolutely right. Thank you for your time, George Eustice, Secretary of State for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, appearing here on LBC, where, after a minute's time, news is going to come. Let's tell you what's coming up in the next hour, though. We will be looking at more on that Michel Barnier story. Who said this? The problems of immigration are not moderate. I think we have to take the time for 3 or 5 years to suspend immigration. No, not Michel Le Pen, not even Nigel Farage.